My name's Eric Stoller. I'm an education consultant focusing on how digital engagement enhances the student experience. And today I'm at the University of Bath to talk as part of their Talk Teaching series. And I'll be talking about social media, teaching and learning, experimentation, critical thinking, and all the things that are really necessary for a thriving modern day institution here in the UK.
So, Eric, welcome to the University of
Hi.
Bath. This is your first visit here?
It's my first trip to Bath.
And to the city?
It is, exactly.
And you're enjoying the sights?
Oh, it's beautiful, beautiful place. I can't wait to go out and explore.
And can you tell us a little bit about the talk that you're going to give this afternoon?
Sure. So my talk is all about how digital, and in this case really social media, can transform and enhance the student experience.
And have you found examples of British universities using social media very well? Are there some good examples of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say British because I immediately thought of the University of Glasgow, which, you know, being up in Scotland, and of course me trying to juggle, you know, what's British, what's Scottish, what's Irish, Welsh. But you know, University of Warwick, for example, they were one of my first clients, and I'd say they've been doing a really good job with their library in terms of using their library social media accounts to engage with students. Because they engage with personality and they have sort of an interest around the student experience first with their social media presence. And then, you know, one that I think we don't think about enough that comes to mind is probably the Open University. You know, they're, I'd say, everywhere in the UK, but their social media presence, you know, from Instagram to YouTube to Twitter is fantastic. And then, of course, you look at, like I said, University of Glasgow, they do a great job. Cambridge, you know, Cambridge University is fantastic. Their Instagram is probably one of my highest recommended Instagrams to follow because just the quality of the photographs and the unique shots that they post, it's definitely worth a follow.
So I think people can probably immediately imagine what the use of Twitter might look like in a university setting. But can you tell us a bit more about Instagram? Because you're completely dependent on the quality of images, aren't you, in a setting like that? So how can a university engage with that kind of?
Well, and it's funny because Instagram is it's like art, you know, and art is very subjective, and everybody has their own opinions on what looks good and what doesn't. And you know, Cambridge, as I cited earlier, they do a really good job, I think, because they have sort of a designated campus photographer, someone who's a professional, who takes pictures of what's obviously a very pretty place and makes it look even better through the medium of Instagram. But they also do things like Instagram stories, which is sort of a daily story from a different point of view. So I know that a lot of universities in the UK have allowed students to take over their Instagram account and run maybe a story, sort of, you know, hi, I'm so-and-so, and this is my course that I'm studying, and here's what my day is like. And it's a fantastic way to kind of inject a unique voice into a university social media account, which is generally run by maybe a marketing and comms unit. You know, and a student's story is so unique, and so it's really empowering to, one, showcase a student's story, and two, get a different member of your community in there to sort of play in that social media space.
So are the institutions that do the really positive stuff, are they exceptionally well resourced? Is it because they've ploughed money into this area, or are there other features or factors that affect success?
Yeah, that's a great question in terms of, you know, the more money you put into it, is that going to enable success? And what I found, because I've worked with universities all over the world, is that it's not necessarily about resource or funding. It's just about the energy and enthusiasm of the people who are running the channels. I've seen teams of 3 or 4 people do amazing work that would rival a shop of 20 people. And so sometimes it just happens to be, you know, who's more artistic, who's more creative, and who's more willing to kind of relinquish control in order to create something really powerful. So those institutions that let their students run their accounts, you know, there's an element of relinquishing control there. And I think some institutions aren't necessarily at that point in their sort of social media growth where they're up to letting people run their accounts.
So again, I think we can all probably imagine how social media helps to develop a sense of community and builds networks amongst students and staff. But our talk this afternoon is about teaching. So what kinds of uses can student-facing teaching staff consider for social media?
So that's a great question. And it's one of those things where I'm always considering what the right answer is to a question that could have been answered years ago. We talk a lot about social media oftentimes as if it's still new or it's emerging. And there are newish channels. But for me, what it comes down to is what's keeping someone who is engaged in a teaching or lecturing capacity from utilizing social media. Because the variety of social media channels that we've been using, they've been around for a long time. Facebook launched in 2004 in the US. Twitter, I think, launched in 2006. YouTube's been around for a long time. Blogs and various blogging platforms have been around for quite some time. There's no shortage of tools. There's no shortage of examples of people in a variety of disciplines using different social media channels in their teaching practice. There are so many examples. In fact, it's almost too hard to name just a few because they're all over the place. And so my question usually to someone who's interested in using social media in their teaching is to look at, okay, who are your role models? Who are the people that you look at in your particular area of study or your field who are using social media and you think, wow, I wish I could do that too. I wish I could be like them in terms of what they're doing. And initially you could emulate them. I mean, it's not as if you have to create something brand new from scratch. I think that's part of the art of teaching, right? We're all sort of borrowing from one another and it's like a giant remix project. And especially with social media, when it's all very public, you can see what other staff have placed on YouTube. You can see what other institutions are putting up on Instagram. The tools are there. And we've already named a few of them from YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, you name it. There are institutions, there are those involved in teaching who are using these technologies. So it's more of a question of what are the barriers to entry, or what are some of the challenges that people are having in sort of taking up these tools and embedding it in their own practice. Because like I said, the examples are everywhere.
So you don't think it has anything to do with one's discipline or one's field of study? There aren't particular fields or courses that would be more open to using social media?
I would think almost every field of study has a story to tell. Regardless of it's from the humanities to the sciences to everything in between. There's a story to tell, and that story can be shared in some way or another on social media. If it's a research project, if it's a success story, and if it's just something about hey, student success, that can be shared.
So we know this is something that's not necessarily dependent on resource. Why do more of us not engage directly?
Yeah.
What are the barriers?
Well, that's the question that sort of has I don't want to say plagued my career, but it's the question that comes up for me personally and professionally and quite often. Because the day that I can crack that question, the day that I can come up with an answer, whether or not I can sell it or not as a consultant, it's beside the point. I think that I don't always want to be tackling that question. I think that question is sort of at the heart of my consultancy around digital engagement, because it's what's keeping people from moving forward. And I think sometimes it has to do with incentive and motivation. Does your organization reward you for experimenting with new things? And if you are rewarded for trying new things and learning new things, you will do those things. But if you're not, then you don't have to. And I think that happens a lot of times at the universities where people aren't necessarily rewarded for trying new things. In fact, when you look at sort of appraisals or promotion guidelines and things like that, systems that sort of rank you in terms of whether or not you're being successful in your teaching or research practice, experimentation isn't always in there because you might fail. You might try some social media platform out maybe for a particular module and maybe it doesn't work. But what did you learn from that experience? What did you learn for the next time when you try a different social media channel that might work more successfully? And I think that's really the key, is allowing people to fail, allowing people to experiment, but yet rewarding them for trying to learn new things.
So it's as much about the culture that we generate around these activities as it is the activities themselves.
Absolutely.
And are there perhaps two key things that you would like people to come away from as a result of your presentation this afternoon?
Yeah, well, I would say experimentation is a good thing, and that experimentation is much better for the organization as a whole than sort of fear of trying. There's this perception oftentimes that the risks outweigh the reward, and it's actually flipped. There's so many great examples of how social media is used in higher education, much more so than anything bad that has happened. So that's number one, is experimentation. The second thing is really, and it's like kind of a logistical thing really, is to make time for learning. You prioritize time for learning. You can't experiment without time. And you've got to be able to put in time to learn new things.
Eric, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot.